has VetDoc impacted your life?
Huh.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
This is a hard question.
Why didn't you let me prepare for this?
I'd say the biggest impact that it's had has been like just showing me how much people have gone through and how like I can't take things in my life for granted, because I've heard all of these stories and met all of these people who have sacrificed so much, like were willing to risk their lives, watch their friends die, who came home like less than who they were before, for their country. And I've realized that like I can't take my life or the things I have for granted, because these people were willing to give up theirs for me to get those. And I think that that's like the biggest thing that this class has taught me and the biggest impact that it's had.
VetDoc has taught me to appreciate the differences in everybody. It's taught me that we all have different stories and we all have different backgrounds, and we need to appreciate those differences.
I think it's kind of impacted my life in that it's like taught me how to focus on what's important. Like whenever I'm working on, you know, like the sequence and like trying to get it done for a deadline, it's never been like, am I doing something that's going to be like worthy of an A? My concern is always, am I working towards something that like Dan is going to be proud of? And I think that's kind of like taught me to focus on what's important rather than just kind of like the superficial of like getting good grades or, you know, that kind of thing.
This is hard. It's impacted my life in a lot of ways. I've learned a lot of things throughout the class. I learned that I have to persevere when things get kind of hard. Hearing all the stories of the veterans is something that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. The people that I've met in the class, staying in Unum, what they've taught me is something that I've learned a lot. I mean, not one day goes by that I don't think about the class and the stuff that I can do to make my doc better, stuff like that. So I mean, it's with me every day. It's constantly impacting my life. Like, I could not tell people in enough words about how much it means to me and how much the class has changed me.
It's basically given me perspective on everything our veterans have gone through to get us where we are today. Like, we literally wouldn't be in this class without them. And I think the class has really helped me get through a lot of personal stuff too. Like when my grandma died and my grandpa died, it gave me a shelter. And it gave me something to put my heart into when I didn't really have anything left. And it's been by far the greatest honor of my life. And when I look back on high school, it'll definitely be the thing I miss the most.
I feel like watching these people finally be able to tell stories that they maybe felt like they couldn't have previously has played a big part in shaping who I want to be. I want to provide that sort of help, that ability to be confided in. I want to be that for people in the future, and VetDoc helped me realize how big of a role you can play in somebody's life just by listening to what they have to say and reminding them that their experiences are valid and important and valuable.
Well, I've never really had a class that stresses me out or that gets me so emotionally involved. Just all of the time that you put in and stuff, and having so many members of my family who have been veterans, and seeing like the positive impacts they can have on veterans and such, and just how much effort as a whole the class has put in, and having friends who've earlier taken the class, like how much it means to be a part of this, and how much it means to put in all the work, and in the end having it all pay off in the gala and giving your veteran the documentary that you put so much work into. And it's really impacted me a lot personally, and it's just makes all of my other classes just not seem as important because of like how large of an impact VetDoc can actually have compared to like all the other things I've ever experienced in school life.
The Harlem Veteran Project, or VetDoc to us students, is so much more than making documentaries. It is not 30 students sitting in front of a computer screen, cutting up an interview and placing B-roll. In one word, VetDoc is opportunity. It's a chance for us juniors and seniors to learn something real. Being in VetDoc teaches you that life is not as clear-cut as people would like you to believe. The veterans that we interview were not much older than we are now when they were sent off to fight for our country. Each one of them had different experiences, learned different lessons, and they all took something different away from their time in the service. Sitting in on interviews, meeting veterans at Midway Village, listening to their stories and their experiences gives us the opportunity to form meaningful friendships and gain new perspectives. We learn more about history and life in one interview with a veteran than we do in an entire semester of some classes. VetDoc will stay with us forever because the lessons we learn come from real heroes who have experienced such pain and loss, but who take the time to come in and share their stories with us. VetDoc was more meaningful than any other class. VetDoc is a family. Because it is so stressful and the material carries so much weight, the students in this program form a bond. We recognize that the world is a lot bigger than we initially thought, and we realize that the important things in life are much larger than typical high school drama. Listening to their experiences and hearing the emotion in their voice is humbling. There is heartbreak and pain in every story, and we spend all year trying to highlight their experiences and demonstrate the sacrifices that each veteran made. For the first time in our high school careers, we are spending all year making something for someone else. We each have an overwhelming need to make our veteran proud, and this pressure brings us together. We asked all the students from previous years to come to this year's gala and join us on stage. We want to thank you all for your work in the program. You have all helped to make VetDoc what it is now. Our documentaries continue to get better every year, and it's because we learn from each other. So thank you for laying the foundation and making it what it is. For this year's gala, we have decided to follow the journey of a soldier. For many of these men, this journey started when they were no older than we are now.
It was during the Depression. My folks had kind of a hard time, but we survived.
Well, when I grew up, Kansas City was a peaceful town, and you could, like, we didn't have to lock our doors. At summertime, we slept on the front porch, and didn't worry about nothing.
I was born in Urbana, Illinois. My family is railroad families. Lived in a lot of different states because my father was transferred.
I went to night school and I went to summer school to take extra credits so I could graduate a year ahead of time.
When I was in high school, two of my friends, they were a year older than I was and a grade higher than I was, joined in the Navy, and I kept trying to go with them, but my parents wouldn't sign. So finally, my junior year, I convinced them to let me go, and I went in there.
My dad didn't tell anybody where he was going. He had a t-shirt and blue jeans. So they were going to go join the Navy. And, well, they didn't make it. The vehicle broke down. They bought a motorcycle for parts, and that broke down. They ended up taking a bus to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where my father needed somebody to sign. He was underage. He was only 15. So a guy was either, they said the story goes, either coming out of a bar or a drugstore, one or the other. Anyway, he found this guy. Carol Jean paid him a couple of bucks to sign the Guardian paper so my dad could be enlisted. And he signed it, Jake Phibbs. And I always thought that was amusing, but that's the story as my dad says.
Once I graduated high school, I went into the Army, which I knew from, by the time I was 4 years old, that was my goal. I think that was my destiny. I mean, that's all I ever wanted to do, my whole life.
So some of those things were happening in my high school years and my early college years. I didn't understand it, very honestly. You're kind of, you know, I was a jock, I was playing ball, I was having a good time, I was in school. It got very real pretty fast.
I enlisted. I was in college. I was at Northern. I was a senior, and I just was a little bit of a loss at what I wanted to do. And as the oldest of five, Dad didn't have a lot of money, and it was to the point that I wanted to keep spending his money or not, and not knowing for sure what I wanted to do. So I enlisted. I enlisted in the Navy Reserves, which at that time was a 2-year active program. You would be at home for a while, working or whatever, and then you would go off to boot camp, and then at some point after that you go for 2 years active duty. But that was in the fleet. I lived in the Navy surface fleet, and I enlisted on, matter of fact, I enlisted on December 7th, 1967. That's Pearl Harbor Day, and my dad had been at Pearl Harbor, so he was very proud that I enlisted on Pearl Harbor Day.
All my classmates, white classmates, should I say, were being inducted into the service, or they volunteered to service. Whereas I was not allowed to go into service because of the classification of 4C, which they put on all of the Japanese Americans as if we were aliens.
We were 10 years old when we got here, and we couldn't speak English. So they started us in first grade. And there was a lot of fallout, you know, interaction between children and whatever. And we just decided that we'd had enough of the bullying and picking on, and my twin brother decided on the Marines, and I just followed right along with him, and we both enlisted.
Went down to Vicksburg, Mississippi, where I had seniority on the railroad, and worked there trying to get enough money to get back into school. That's when I was drafted.
Well, you pretty much knew it was going to come. I didn't really expect to be drafted at 19 because most of them were a little bit older than that usually, and I guess you just kind of expected it. You didn't. I wasn't fearful of it or anything like that, but I had never really been away from home. I'd never been out of the state or anything else, so it was going to be a big deal, and at any rate, but it was kind of a scary time, I suppose you'd say, you know.
Well, I wasn't very happy, to be real honest with you, and I thought, my wife and I talked about it, and I said, well, I'm going to, get drafted into the Army, and I'm going to end up at Fort Leonard Wood or Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
And I figured, okay, fine, we're going to war with North Korea. We're already going to war in Vietnam. They're going to get me no matter what, so I went down and enlisted.
There was a weekend where we did go, since I wasn't on call, we did go from Charlottesville to Tennessee, Hopkinsville, to Fort Campbell, and to visit the hospital that I had been assigned to, or the unit. And we got a nice hello and talk and everything, and as we left, the sergeant said, now, well, what are you two planning to do? I said, well, we'll probably just go out and look around town, see if we can find some place to stay and get it all set up. And that was the one classic statement he made. He said to me, well, when you are ready to join us, we will be in an undisclosed location, so you need not look around town for anything.
And the first day, the sergeant told me that he was my father, my mother, and my Indian chief for all those who was Indian. And I was sitting up there like, what the heck is this? anyhow, that was the way we was inducted into the military. And induction in the military was that whatever you used to be, forget it, because we got something for you.
Well, basic training it's all the same for almost everybody. You know, they treat you like crap. They tear you down and then they build you back up.
I expected that it would be hard, but I didn't have any idea of how hard.
It was really pretty intense. You start out with assuming you know absolutely nothing about anything. They start you out from the ground up.
Every day was something unexpected.
Soon as those doors opened on the bus, let me tell you, all hell broke loose. You got 10 seconds to get off this bus, and 9 are already gone. That's how it started. And you know how they gave us our clothing and our bedding? We ran around a corner, and as we ran around the corner, they threw it at us.
Every time you went to eat, you had to do the bars, all the way down, all the way back, all the way down, jump off, had to give your serial number, your name, serial number, and then you could go eat.
I mean, back then, the drill instructors could push you, they could get right up in your face and scream at you, they could do things to you, make you, you know, do 200-300 push-ups, stay until you were done.
I remember one day, Sergeant Knight comes out, he says, I don't know what's wrong with you guys, but I gotta train you on everything, don't I? You're using too much toilet paper. What? Yeah, using too much. Now I'll show you proper military method here. He pulls off one little square of toilet paper like that. He stuck his finger through the middle of it. He said, now you wipe with that like that, and then you wipe your finger off. Now you got how to do it? Do it right. You're standing there trying to keep a straight face and stuff.
And the drill instructor grabbed both of us, you know, and to attention, and you know, Private Broderick, give me a razor, you know, that kind of stuff. And he took my razor and he started hitting this guy on the forehead with a razor, and he said, do you need, and every time he'd say a word, he'd punctuate it by hitting him with a razor. Do you need a mirror to brush your teeth? And blood is just running down his face, you know, but, and so then we had to switch positions, of course. And I looked in the mirror and I could just see this like pink foam around. You know, he wasn't hurt, but it was interesting.
We had a guy jump off the water tower, killed himself. About the 4th week of basic training, we woke up in the middle, right behind our barracks. He woke up and had a searchlight out there. Fire department was out there and they had a bullhorn. Guy was wanting to go home and he was on top of the water tower and he finally jumped.
It's just a very aggressive atmosphere where you're expected to do something in a given amount of time. And if you don't, you're doing push-ups or you're doing something to learn. You have X number of minutes to do something, and it's push, push, push.
They're trying to whip you into shape. But it's not just physical shape. It's also a psychological shape, and you don't know that at the time. You've got people screaming in your face. They want you to learn how to take orders.
The slightest mistake you made was punctuated with some kind of mindless violence, which of course was not mindless. It was made to see you see the folly of a mistake, the painful result of a mistake, a small mistake. Very wise.
A date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked.
We intend to convince the communists that we cannot be defeated by force of arms or by superior power.
The American people in their righteous might will win through.
They're not easily convinced In recent months, they have greatly increased their fighting forces. I have asked the commanding general, General Westmoreland, what more he needs to meet this mounting aggression. He has told me, and we will meet his needs. I have today ordered to Vietnam the Air Mobile Division and certain other forces which will raise our fighting strength from 75,000 to 125,000 men almost immediately. Additional forces will be needed later, and they will be sent as requested.
Those who have experienced war can often divide their lives into two parts, before the war and after the war. The time in between those parts, no matter how long or how short, is a time of unimaginable change. The hardships they face, the sacrifices one must make. Nothing can prepare you for the cost of war, and no one comes back from war as the same person they were before it. That time of before represents the last remaining memories of what could have been for these veterans. They were children once before. They had dreams, they played outside with their friends. They had chores, and they probably complained about them. As teenagers, they played sports. They went to the movies. They went to high school dances, and they were rebellious. However, by the time they were of age, they had little choice in their fate. Many were drafted, others enlisted, but most knew they would soon be wearing a uniform and serving their flag and country. Shortly after entering the service, they would be enrolled in basic training, where they would learn survival skills, how to follow orders, and how to work as a unit. Within a matter of months, they were no longer civilians. They were soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. They would be sent across the globe to foreign lands with the mission of ensuring that the freedoms we have may be shared and protected, free of oppression at the hands of tyranny and injustice. During this time, they would experience some of the brightest and darkest moments of their lives. They would witness some of the most moving examples of compassion, yet also be disturbed by the world's capacity for destruction and hate. Whether they served on the front lines of combat or possessed a different role away from the battlefield, each of these individuals had an important purpose, one that we, as civilians, cannot take for granted. It is our responsibility, as Americans, to remember and honor the sacrifices our veterans have made. What you are about to witness is history in its purest form. History through their eyes.
When did you realize that the Vietnam War was indeed a war and that this was different than basic training?
Boy, the first time I got shot at. First conflict. Yeah, that brought all the reality in. I remember taking cover, E6 slapping me on the head and said, put your 16 on that ridge right over there, probably 100 yards away. He says, anything pops up, shoot it. So I got my sights on that ridge, and all of a sudden the head came up and I shot it. And I shot it because I saw the red. Shot him right in the head. Never saw him after that, but then I thought, did I just kill somebody? You know, yeah, I did.
I remember laying there waiting for my turn to go down to move out and go down there, and I'm laying next, there's several of us just waiting for our turn, and they called in air power, so they called in jets, and these jets are coming over and dropping bombs, and laying there, and I'm laying right next to this guy, and all of a sudden he just screamed. He's just screaming out of mad because a piece of, you know, just shrapnel had went in the back of his leg as we were laying there. And man, that was a first experience with that. And then we finally got up and got online, and we're just going through the jungle, and that was the first time I saw a soldier that had been killed, and it was kind of hard to take. I mean, it was just hard because I saw him. There was a stretcher laying there, and they'd thrown him on a stretcher. He was thrown on a stretcher, and they pulled his shirt over his head because he'd been shot through the head. I remember looking at him and just going, God, he looks just like me.
Well, I go down there to the area where we're being, we're sitting there, and the other guys come in, and there's supposed to be 50 of us in this platoon. I counted heads, 37. And I looked over here, here's 4 more guys. One guy's got his hand blown off. Another guy's missing a foot. Another guy's missing a leg. And I thought, I'm the medic. Sorry. That was the most terrifying gotcha moment of my life. Because by this time I knew we got on helicopters, we flew out, we landed, 1 medic per platoon. And these guys I'm responsible for. They're counting on me to keep them alive.
You know, when you look around and there's all these other people depending on you, basically, you just have to do it. I mean, one time we had a mortar round land on a bunker of one of our mortars, like the little on the side, the little ammo bunker. Hit there while one of my friends was eating chow, killed him instantly. Wounded everyone else in the whole gun pit, you know. So then all those guys have to go, you know, they got to go. And so they took some other guys, half of them from the other gun pit, and they put them over there. And this one sergeant we had was a real squared away guy. He said, okay, you take care of this. But I was, by that time I was a corporal. So I just picked up the chow that was his, that was laying down on the lower level of the pit, you know, which wasn't blown away. I picked that up and started eating it. And I started telling these guys to break out mortar rounds. So you do this and you do that. I didn't, you know. And here I am, like, putting food in my mouth and trying to swallow it, you know. You know, it's just what you got to do.
Through the course of war, soldiers develop their persona to fit the reality of their situation, sacrificing the comfort of civilian life to adapt to the uncommon demands of battle. Each of their responsibilities is designed to hold the enemy at bay and strike when he is weakest. To abandon that responsibility is not an option, as the essence of their strategy is to maintain the strength of the unit, no matter the cost.
We would schedule elective surgeries, so we did a lot of hernia repairs, a lot of vasectomies. We did cyst removals, a variety of basically elective operations. And if we had something scheduled but there was something coming in, we generally canceled that. Because when it got busy, it got busy. You'd have bullet wounds, arms or legs. You would have head wounds from bullets. Most of them we didn't really work on, because if they either didn't make it to us, or when they did, they passed away before anything could be done.
I guess overall, my experience in Nam was going on these search and destroy missions that lasted like a month. So we'd go out in the bush and we'd sweep through a valley or something like that. We'd go from village to village, looking for the enemy, looking for things like an abundance of rice or something in a village. So we knew then that the enemy was using that village as a spot to get food. But we would sweep through during the day, and then we'd find some high ground in the evening. Everybody would dig a foxhole. You'd set up a perimeter, protect that area that you're at, and then at night we would send out ambushes. Generally speaking, I'd say I probably went on an ambush maybe 3-4 times a week, something like that. And then after the 30 days, then we would get helicoptered back to Quezon Air Base, get resupplied, get our mail, hot shower, but most of the time we lived in the bush for the 13 months I was there.
It's the second to last mission, and at that time I had a Tagalir enlisted man for acting as bombardier, and he was on his 61st mission to the 65th, which is the end of the tour. At the 64th mission, we got jumped by the German jets, the Me-262s, and it's like mixing apples and oranges. You know, they're very, very fast. The only trouble that saved our bacon was that they were so fast, they had really had to aim the whole airplane at, and they were coming in so fast on us. They would make one pass, and then their fuel was only good for about a half an hour, and then they became a glider. We came in on this mission, and we went to rendezvous point for our fighters, and they were all on the ground getting rearmed and fueled again. We rendezvoused up there, and we had to make another turn looking for fighters, and we only got 3. We should have had 15 fighters up there with us, but we only got 3. And then one of the 262s came in and sat about 40 feet above me, and he peppered away at the guy ahead of me and knocked his engine, disabled it. So they eventually had to bail out, or they bailed out.
And you could see out across the treetops from where our runway was. You could see Laos on the other side of the river. You could see mountains. Actually, they're more like knee hills than mountains. And we had to go across there to get to this pilot. And for 3 days, they tried to get across there, and they couldn't. And we were creating more casualties. So one night, we were just kind of out there watching, and we were in charge of what's called a starlight scope. You know the night vision goggles? Well, in 1970, that was just a scope, and it was brand new technology, and we did the fixing of them. There wasn't a lot to do, but we did the fixing. And we were watching, and we just saw a bunch of flashes going like this, and we thought, well, it's still going on. The next morning, the mountain wasn't there, and they got the pilot and came back. And the reason was some B-52s came in and just blew it away.
It was extremely beat up. Seoul changed hands, I think, 3 or 4 times during the war, and there was very little left. I remember going in and going down to the Capitol there, and the palace, and the presidential palace and everything in the Capitol, and it was just pretty much bombed out. And we was able to go in, and we climbed all the way up into the dome up there at the Capitol, and just parts of it was falling in, and it had beautiful gardens, and the palace back there apparently had all been really beautiful, but it was just a disaster. And what the main business districts, it was just shells of buildings left, you know, and so most of the street vendors and stuff were just along the alleys or the edges of the street, and pretty desolate.
While individual responsibilities have varied from war to war as the nature of the fight evolves, their joint responsibility to push fellow soldiers through boredom, terror, hopelessness, and aching sadness remains constant. The depth of the brotherhood that is formed amidst the hardships endured during war can only be learned through its necessity. As individuals, soldiers carry the title of infantryman, sniper, radio operator, or medic, but together they are bonded by a sense of duty to fight for each other. These veterans are human throughout, but only through their unifying experience have they become soldiers.
I can boil it all down to huge amounts of time that is extremely boring, that you do anything to pass the time, and just something crazy that you wouldn't do normal life. And then there'll be 30 minutes of just extreme terror. And sometimes in that extreme terror, you'll do something stupid that they'll call brave.
I was in the Philippines. It was the day we landed there, and the chief sent me down to the shore to see if there was any equipment left down there. I went down to the water and looked, and there was nothing left there. You know, we had gotten everything up. I turned around to walk back, and they took off with the weapons carrier, and I thought they were just joking. And so I didn't bother. I thought, I'm not going to go running, you know, and they thought, and they weren't. They just took off and deserted me there, which is mutiny in, you know, in the middle of a battle when you aren't supposed to leave your buddy regardless of dead or alive. We never left anybody. And so I was trying to figure out what I'd do when, and I would duck in the bush. And these guys, this Japanese patrol, come out of the other side, and all they could see was my shoulders and my helmet. So I slid my rifle, I had it hanging on my shoulder. I left it slide down, and I pushed it back under the bushes, and then they came over and motioned for me to sit down on the ground, and they were talking in Japanese and that, and like they were arguing, I don't know. And so they left one guy with me and to guard me. And when we went through the Marine training, one of the things, you know, we were to survive was you had to keep an eye on this guy, and you had to be ready to overpower him at any second when he made a mistake. Really dumb, he went and set his rifle down and propped it against a bush away from opposite me. But then he dug in his uniform, and he was going to get out, and he got out an old package of American cigarettes, and he had a Zippo liner, and I knew he had taken them off somebody's body. So I had a couple packs of cigarettes in my thing, and I'm sitting there on the ground, and I just took a pack of cigarettes out, and I held them up in between my fingers like that. I didn't even look at them. And
That really dumbfounded him, I think. He was really taken completely off guard. And so he started opening the package of cigarettes. Then he tried to light it, and he couldn't. When he turned like this to light that cigarette and held his hand up, you know how they do that? Why, in the meantime, I had got up on my feet off of my butt, and I had unsnapped my knife, and that was it. But I still dream about this stuff. But you wouldn't think 70 years later you would. I was 17.
But your mind just goes completely blank. When you're in that panic kind of mode, you're thinking, oh shit. And please God. And that's the honest to God's truth. And anybody who says they weren't afraid is a liar, or they were a damn fool. Because especially in those situations, you're scared. You're scared. You just don't know what's going to happen.
They were desperate then. I think that the planes would just actually dive into your ship. I mean, they were kamikaze. They were going to go try to bomb you. And we got hit at Okinawa with, I think there was 6 or 7 planes that come in at one time. 8 planes. We shot down 7 in 4 minutes. But the last one came in so low over the water, and the guns couldn't depress. So the 5-inch guns shot the projectiles out there with 0 time on them, and exploded and put up a barrage of shrapnel. And the plane hit that, it disintegrated, but the bomb skipped across the water that hit us in the side. And it blew out 2 sections there. And that's when I said that we flooded 2 on the other side and thought we'd get up. And we got to Guam, and they put us on a dry dock. And I think we were there, something like 2 weeks, something like that. And repairs were made, and back to Okinawa.
The worst one I saw was when I was doing resupply and stuff, we got mortared. The mortars started flying in. So we just jumped under the Camel, and we're laying on the ground there. And he had, this big old guy building this, he had a cot, and he built some sandbags all around it. Well, he just laid down in there. Well, unfortunately, a mortar round landed practically on top of him, and it was bad. You could see right through him. There wasn't much left of him, and his cot was full of blood. And I'll never forget that smell, because that never went away. Just sat there in the sun, and that's an awful smell. But there wasn't much left of him. Oh, geez.
They finally were sending us new soldiers in. And this young man walked past me. Well, he didn't get past me. He walked alongside of me. I grabbed a hold of him, and I wouldn't let him go. He was my replacement. At least that's the way I felt. They had to cut his daggone coat, his sleeve off of him, because I wouldn't let go of him.
And we got the body bag out, and we scraped her body, the pieces of her body, into this body bag. And I was trying just as hard as I could not to look. I kept trying to tell the family not to open the bag. And they unzipped the bag, and all I could hear was these kids screaming. and crying. And that ate away at me for years. And I kept saying, you don't want to see this, you don't want to see this. But they had to know it was their grandma.
War, to those who have not lived it, is a fragment of history. But among veterans, it is the living past. The thing about war is that everyone sees it differently. And when we capture these stories, we gain an appreciation for those who have served and honor those who have been lost. For those who never made it home to share their story, we can only reference the living. We must see the war through their eyes.
Losing your friends. That's the hardest part.
Did you lose close friends?
Yeah, I did. Lost a couple.
How do you deal with that while you're there?
I don't know. How do you deal with it? I guess you just go on. I mean, when you lose them the way we lose them, it's kind of removed because they leave on a mission, they don't come back. You don't see the body. You know that they're dead, but it's like the war that I fought. It was removed. I know I killed people. I never saw them. You do a long distance. I mean, up over the trail, I know I killed people. You never saw them.
You couldn't let the enemy's deaths of you having to kill them affect you. You couldn't do that. You're not where you should be if you think that way.
I didn't feel, at that time I didn't feel anything. I couldn't let myself feel.
What was your worst
moment? Helping get the wounded in the KIAs. KIAs killed in action. Off the mountaintop. Onto a helicopter to get them back out of the rear and get them out of our area. And unfortunately, you know, in the scheme of things in the battle, the battle doesn't last 10 minutes. Sometimes it goes on for hours, and weren't in a position to get our casualties out as fast as maybe we should have. But you know, some of them were in pretty rough shape, and some of them lost an arm, a leg. And one of my jobs was, while I was in the rear, was to assist the corpsmen and stuff to get these guys into the body bags and get them ready to go back to the rear. And then when I went back to the rear, that job didn't go away because First Sergeant and I, every time the company took casualties, we'd have to go out to the triage center and we'd have to identify the bodies. And so we'd have to open the bag up and identify them. And that wasn't real pleasant. And that's, I guess, one of the things that bothers me. It's unfortunate, you know, and I look back and say, you know, how lucky was I? You know, that could be me.
In class, we treat these veterans' stories with absolute respect, but at times we can get a little silly.
Please enjoy this funny clip as we go into intermission.
What's Thunderbird?
The music that Casey uses is literally her entire dog.
That's Casey's nickname, Thunderbird. So for the past 6 years, we've been making documentaries of veterans. Pretty much making them all. Mega vet.
I honestly hate this place. I was gonna tell you guys that, but
And I just tricked the kids into thinking they're making them. I've literally done everything for you. And it's really just a lot of me doing it.
22, 23, 24, 25, 26. There's 26 people. I think you're all lying. There's a...
I had a little meltdown earlier today. I'm not sure if anybody noticed.
I can't take this anymore!
I'm better now, though.
I don't know how to do color correction.
I don't either. Okay, because I have my headphones on. Here, and you're gonna really fun guys. You like, oh yeah.
Okay, so Carson and I have been dating secretly for the past 6 months.
That's for the
Can I
script
use-
right there.
And we've been hiding it from the class, and I act like I don't like him in class, but I actually do. And I think we're going to announce soon to the class.
No, he did not. Kendall, did Jimmy leave? You're up early?
Yes,
actually.
Everyone in this class thinks I'm Schwarber.
Get up, Schwarber. That's right, Schwarber.
I am.
Shut up, Zane. Vet doc kids are usually the last kids in the school.
Who has the thing of the...
All right, I'm out of here. See ya.
Every veteran returns home from combat a changed person. In the time that they have been in combat, these individuals have experienced horrors that nobody can imagine unless they too have witnessed them. Some were injured in combat by shrapnel or by bullets, and others were exposed to caustic chemicals that could affect future generations of their family. They have all felt paralyzing fear, they have lost friends, and they have witnessed pain and death. It is because of these experiences that these individuals returned home as someone different than the person they were when they left. They have been permanently altered, both physically and mentally, by their experiences. Some men are left with physical scarring, while others received invisible wounds, memories of the atrocities they witnessed. Many veterans suffer from PTSD, experiencing nightmares, paranoia, and depression as a result. Others still deal with disabilities as a result of the injuries they sustained in combat. Some men returned home and were shunned by American society because they served their country, because they were willing to risk their lives, to sacrifice everything for their country, while other men returned home and were ostracized and targeted due to their race. No matter what these individuals came home to, they all shared one thing. While these men came to the United States and left the ever-present danger of a combat zone behind, they couldn't stop fighting once they returned home. Instead, they came home to fight their own personal battles, day after day. The next clip will highlight the experiences veterans had once they returned home from combat.
violent typhoon whips at Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet as winds ranging up to 138 miles an hour pound the force as it withdraws from an attack on the Jap homeland.
50-foot waves, 2 storms, and was I sick and running out both ends. It was miserable, I'll tell you. And the GIs had it worse because they were down a hole in side-by-side bunks with no partitions in between and inhaling the odor.
At the end of a 5-day trip from England, the Queen Elizabeth, world's largest ocean liner, pulls into New York Harbor. Aboard are almost 15,000 happy GIs, most of them men of the 8th Air Force, jamming every square inch of deck space for a look at the USA. This is the first non-secret docking of the Queen Elizabeth, her first voyage with lights showing and portholes open. These are the guys who helped win it for us against the Nazis, and the entire nation welcomes them home.
These men have just emerged from many long days of combat during which they faced and fought the Viet Cong. Drove him from areas which he had heretofore controlled, opened roads for travel which he had dominated, and thereby contributed substantially to the turning of the tide in Vietnam. Yet it is not for their military accomplishments alone, important though they are, that they are commended by their commander. It is for other activities, more subtle, less easy to grasp and define, yet every bit as indispensable to the final decision in the war that is being fought in Vietnam today. A war unique in the long history of armed conflict between men and nations.
Do you remember your last day in Vietnam?
Yes, I do. We were pulling small arm fire, and they said that all flights were canceled, and I'm going home. I've been here 2 years, I'm going home. So I volunteered for a gunner on the helicopter, and we took a couple of passes over where the gunfire was coming from, and then they took me on over to Saigon. I got off there. I left everything. It just didn't have anything worthwhile anyway. But yeah, that was my coming home.
I came in country with a guy by the name of John, and John got wounded. John and I came in country, checked in the same day, and so on and so forth, and he got orders to come home the same day with me. And so we had to get on an airplane together, a C-130, and ride in the back, and there's no seats in it. You can sit on the ground or sit on the deck. But anyway, Da Nang was a whole different world for us, and we got there, and places were air conditioned, and we got a sandwich or something in an air conditioned mess hall, and went to a movie. And when we came out of the movie, John's all of his clothing was drenched with sweat, and he was white as a ghost. And I just looked at him and I said, "What in the hell is wrong? What's going on, John?" He said, I don't feel good. And I took him to the aid station, and I had to leave him there. And in a couple of days, another guy from the company came back and said that John had died. And he had malaria, and it was kind of a fluke. You know, to this day, I still don't get it, because malaria was essentially curable, pretty much. And he'd been back in the rear over half of his tour, but his name was on the wall.
in my case, I come back to a small town where everybody knew me, and I was just back home, you know. It was, I've heard a lot of stories of it wasn't always like that to every place, but yeah, I think we were treated fine.
Like I said, I came home in the summertime. I just kind of blended in, and they warned us, you know, that don't make a big deal about it. You know, don't get in any rallies or anything like that. And so, you know, like Forrest Gump, don't stand there and, you know, in front of everybody and make a big scene about it. So I didn't do that. I just stepped back into society and went back to work at the newspaper and moved on. People would ask me, you know, was I in the service? And yeah, and that was it. I wouldn't make a big deal about it. Those that knew me knew where I was. Nobody ever attacked me personally, although I knew some guys that they did go after.
No decompression at all. Just plucked from the jungle, boom, you're into society now. After a year, after 2 to 3 solid months of being bombarded, we were diving for holes for our life 48 hours before that. Boy, that was hard to take.
Flew into San Francisco, and they had MPs all the way along the line from where we got off the plane to the buses. And, well, you guys don't know, but they, while I was gone, skirts were below the knee when I left, and mini skirts were in when I came home. And it was a shock. I mean, a total shock. And I thought, you know, well, the MPs are standing there because all those guys are coming out of the aircraft, and holy smokes, look at these girls. And, but it wasn't. It was because of people not being against us.
At Kennedy, when I came in, they had protesters there against the war of Vietnam, and they were what we called flower child. You know, they were like hippies with the clothes, and they had flowers in their hair and all that stuff. And they were protesting the Vietnam War. And I started to walk through the terminal, and this one security guard comes up to me. I'm in uniform. And he says, "Sir, I want you to come with me and don't ask any questions." I looked at him real funny, and he said, "Trust me." Then he brought me to this place that was like a lounge. And he brought me inside the lounge, and he told me, he said, "You sit here, I'll come and get you when your plane is ready to board, and I'll take you to the plane." And I looked at him, he says, "I don't want those hippies to get to you. And I don't want you to beat those hippies up and get arrested. You need to go home."
You're in an airport and people are hollering at you, calling you names. And I mean, you talk about an impression upon you. You spent 15 months doing what you thought your country wanted you to do. And the Stars and Stripes doesn't cover any bit to tell you about how much protesting there is that you're going to see in LAX when you land. And when you land, you're in for a shock because you sit there and you go, this is not the country I left, you know. And you sit there and you go, what did I do all this for?
Coming home from war can provoke many different emotions. Each day was spent away from their normal routine. Many made lifelong friends and others had to leave theirs behind. Vietnam War soldiers had some of the toughest roles in country and out. One of the many things they faced was a defoliant called Agent Orange, being dropped daily to eliminate forest covers. Little did they know that it would so negatively impact their health many years later.
They sprayed 5 million gallons a day of Agent Orange. And I didn't pay much attention to it because it's a long ways off, not thinking about it. And about 3 years later, I was feeling this warm, tingling feeling in my feet, but it only occurred when the circulation increased, and I was doing my running, and I figured it was related to my double socking or just all the running I was doing. And I paid no attention to it because it would disappear after that exercise.
The way I was exposed
They had barrels. They fly them in the planes, and they wouldn't have bongs in them barrels, and it would splatter in the plane, and I'd have to take a fire truck out there and wash the plane out. And I got cancer from it. I do have multiple myeloma, which they can't cure.
In 2009, so 1999 and 2009, it was 10 years apart there. I'd had prostate biopsies for, everything was fine the first time. The second time I had prostate cancer.
I don't think they knew. I don't think they knew the dangers of it. And I know I didn't. If I had known, I'd have had on rubber suits and all of that, but yep, that Agent Orange was a terrible thing. But a lot of guys done died from it, but I'm blessed to still be here and doing good.
I was at our reunion in 2009, and one of our nurses, who was a nurse anesthetist in her private life, but had stayed in the service longer and stepped down as a lieutenant colonel, but she was just in the reserve, presented a slideshow to us, Agent Orange related diseases. And you know, I'm sitting there, and I knew the two. Then I look up there, and the third one down was peripheral neuropathy, and the fifth or sixth one down was prostate cancer.
Not only did the soldiers carry home the effects of Agent Orange, but they also brought home the traumas of war. The physical and mental impacts of their experiences still haunt them. War is by no means simple or easy. It impacts them tremendously, leaving a mark on their lives forever.
For 2 weeks, I slept on the floor in front of the front door of my house, my mom and dad's house, because I didn't feel safe going upstairs to the second floor to sleep in a bed. And I was used to sleeping on the ground, you know. I just couldn't, it just started every sound. I mean, my mom dropped a box on the kitchen floor. It sounded just like incoming. Dove for the ground. I was sitting on the couch, dove for the ground. Just instinct, you know. So, hanging with my friends, they were all kind of interested to hear the stories and stuff, but I wasn't willing to share any of that stuff. I felt like I was 19. I felt like I was 40. So all of my friends seemed very immature. So I just felt like I was not one of them anymore. I was different, you know.
Knowing that I could have ended up in the body bag, you know, it still kind of haunts me to know that war is just simply luck at times. You make a decision to turn here, turn there, do something, not do something, and somebody's life is determined by the roll of the dice, what goes on at that instant.
I just say this here. I said I was a clown. I believed in this, love everybody. Because actually, I'm not a clown. I'm the most deadliest thing on 2 feet. But I used my facade as a clown to keep me from really seeing myself. I didn't mean to do that to you, but that's just the way it is. That's why I have to, I personally have to do good. Never mind whatever's going on around me, I personally have to do good. Otherwise, I'll probably fold up and okay, I'm through.
I went in a 19-year-old teenager. 2 years later, I got this big attitude. I got these problems. I got health problems. I got mental problems, dreams, nightmares, you know. If I wasn't working, I was drinking. And I honest to God, There was probably a 4 or 5, 6 year period there. I really couldn't tell you a whole lot other than the fact that I'm alive.
Going through all of that loneliness, all of that exposure to alcohol, all of that grief didn't really start straightening itself out until I met Patty. You know, it really, I got out of the Marines and I started looking more towards companionship and company. The alcoholism lasted for years after that, but I finally kicked that as well.
When was the first time you were thanked for your service?
I would say when the wall went up, because people were made aware of it. Before that, they knew that it was a war, but they didn't really pay any attention. And they really didn't give a crap about us. But when that wall went up and people started seeing all those names, and that they were real human beings that gave their lives for an ideal, then I think people started thinking about it.
Because a lot of the stuff that happened in Vietnam, the civilian world doesn't understand. And it's pretty hard to explain. So, just kept my mouth shut. I went over there as Bill and came home as Bill. And my unit basically stayed there. So I think you have to try to understand that it's part of our society, and it's probably not a good thing necessarily from a, I would say, a perfect world. But you can't forget them, and you can't leave them over there.
Some characters, I'll tell you, they stay with you. You never leave them. You know, I got a copy of that picture of the wall. Have you ever seen that picture of the guy leaning against the wall with his hand on the wall? A lot of people don't really understand it. Well, they do. They get the main idea. But the thing is, he's standing with his hand on the wall, and in his mind, of course, his buddies all come to life, and he sees them because he's looking at their names. But you see, the thing that a lot of people don't realize is they come alive there because they're always with him. They never go away. They're always in his head. He'll never forget them. They're always there. So when he's there, because see, it never goes away. There, you're always there. There comes back all the time, you know? It never goes away. And those guys never go away.
But I couldn't remember Bill's name. And I would stand at that wall crying because I was so ashamed I couldn't find him. I knew where he was killed, I knew when he was killed, but I couldn't remember his name. And you know, you block these things. You don't, it's painful. Bill Fenn, Connecticut. I promised myself I won't forget him again.
Although the pain of PTSD continues to affect their lives, reuniting with other veterans and sharing their memories can help them heal. Reunions allow veterans to reflect on their experiences and share them with one another.
I always feel for those guys that lost their lives, that missed out on post-reunion. To me, that's one of the rewards of war, is to enjoying the peace afterward.
Well, my dad kept in touch with some of his buddies and from the outfit, and went to some reunions. And lo and behold, they started talking and sharing facts about that notorious day at Cooneree. And in 1998, so that had been 47 years plus, my dad got a phone call. It was from the guy who my dad saved, and his name is Robert Sheridan, and he was a retired postal worker out of New York. But he was awestruck when he finally did get to meet Robert Sheridan. He just couldn't believe it. Both wounded in action, and two men's lives parted at that point to be reunited some 47 years later.
The reunions that veterans attend help to keep their experiences alive. This gives them the opportunity to share their piece of the past with the next generation.
Every once in a while you get these wars. Some are small wars, others big world wars like one we fought in. Now you get wars all over, so small wars. But they kill people the same way.
I think that we've learned a lesson. And I hope with all my heart that the generations coming up don't ever let it happen again like it happened with Hitler, and let it go so far as that we have to go over there and repair the damage again.
And that's what makes America unique, is we fought for our rights. And we can't let people take them away. That's what being a veteran's all about, is standing up for our rights, standing up for our children, standing up for our future.
You owe it to the ones that didn't make it. You owe it to them to live your life to the fullest in their honor. That's how you honor them and their demise, is by remembering them and living your life to the best you can, be the best person you can.
I think, and I think of this from time to time, I mean, I'm not a particularly religious guy, but if there's a hereafter, a heaven, say, I want heaven to be standing in a trench line at Cantien, a few of my friends drinking coffee out of a can, out of a cigarette can. And I want that moment to like go on forever. That'd be great.
War will humble you. It will make you appreciate things more. It doesn't take a whole lot to make a guy happy, you know? After you witness some of this crap, so.
Excuse me. I'm okay.
Forgetting is the hard part. The silence is a teacher, a vessel that carries these veterans' memories. The loudest sounds of war are often represented by the muted moments, carrying such immense emotion.
This is a real hard story to tell, and it's not a...
You wouldn't think 70 years later you would. I was 17.
Silence is such a universal language that all feel its compelling power. The silence is not disruptive, but a part of the story, where so much is learned about that experience.
But I still dream about this stuff.
Somewhere we know that without silence, words lose their meaning, that without listening, speaking no longer heals, that without distance, closeness cannot cure.
See, that's why it's really,
Wow.
It's human nature to forget. The value of these stories is intangible, so we must capture these moments, ingrain into these veterans' memories because of its significance. It will be recorded for posterity forever and become part of history. And because of this, it will never die, but live forever.
Oh, this is... Can you turn that off for a minute?
Faces leave a lasting impression, and the sounds of war never go away. One of the things powerful enough to drown out the chaos is the shattering sound of silence. The weight of reflection brings out the hidden memories because they always remain and never fade into the blackness, and what comes pouring out of their remembrance resonates in us. Your silence pierces our hearts, and the outpouring of reflection finds ready and willing listeners. The glimpse of your life we see through the stories you share stay with us. We see the emotions flowing across your face. We can hear how hard it is to speak up over the silence, but your stories still come out. You share more than you thought you had. You share with us the names that always stay with you and bring to life those that are gone. They are always there, and they can always find a place in us because we are always eager to listen. The interview is a time to share with the next generation your experiences and pass off the lessons learned, and for many, it is a therapeutic experience. We can never truly fathom what you went through or what war is, but we can see the lasting effects it has on you and others. We see the person who came out on the other side, wiser and appreciative, but we can't see the kid that went in. We bring you into our lives, and your story goes with us wherever we go. We preserve your experience for others to see and understand. Your silence can sometimes speak more powerfully than words ever could. Your smile brightens the mood, and your laughter warms the room. But we can also see the sadness in your eyes, and your tears shake us to our core. This project is for you, it's for your family, and it's for the next generation to learn from. You'll never leave us, as we will never leave you.